at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We gotta unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his. Oh. And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped. Enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters. Friday, November 8th. I'm Dean Obeidallah. I am hopefully your needy Muslim friend. I'm needy. It's up to you if I'm your Muslim friend or not. I'm hoping yes. So I hope things are going well. We're going to break down more in the world of impeachment. By the way, tomorrow morning, I will be on AM Joy. So if you're around, check it out. She's back. She was sick for several weeks. She's back tomorrow. I'll be on about 10:45 a.m. Hope you'll check it out. Before we get into the hard news, though, we need a little clip from Colbert here. And this is Colbert talking about the rally that happened Wednesday night in Louisiana, where Donald Trump was there. And Trump was bragging about the greatest thing in the world is a Trump rally. Colbert had a different take on it. Here's clip number 1, please.
Whoever Trump was there to support, he made sure to play to the crowd.
So is there any place you would rather be than at a Trump rally on a beautiful, wonderful evening in Louisiana?
Let's see, places I'd rather be than a Trump rally. Let's see, off the top of my head, I'd go the DMV, the dentist, someone else's child's clarinet recital, a Soviet gulag, covered in honey and staked to an anthill, sliding down a 50-foot razor blade into a bathtub of gin, and in conversation with...
And could it be Trump fatigue going on? Is even his own base tired of hearing the same shtick, which is a few new jokes and not much more? In fact, on Wednesday, Rachel Maddow trumped the Trump rally in Louisiana. What happened is Trump got about 500,000 in the key demographic, which is 25 to 54 for news shows, and about 3.2 million viewers. Well, Rachel got 640,000 in the key demographic and about 3.3 million viewers. So that's a really interesting thing about, are they getting tired of the same shtick? We don't know. Tough to tell you. But on Wednesday, she beat him. And that's what's important. So today, the testimony of 2 people were released. 2 important people. And to remind everyone, next week begins the public hearings. This is really when we think of impeachment hearings and you look back at Watergate and you look back at Clinton testimony. This week coming up is the beginning of that. Wednesday and 2 people on Friday. We've got Bill Taylor on Wednesday, and actually 2 people on Wednesday. Bill Taylor is extremely important. He's the career ambassador, Vietnam vet, graduated from West Point, really makes an unbelievable case in his testimony. And then George Kent, we read some of his testimony last night. And then on Friday, the person that I still believe in my heart is the key to this, not because of her, but because what she represented. And that was U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. And she's the one that Giuliani and his little buddies, Furman, and that they wanted out from last year. Last year, they sat down with Congressman Sessions, the Republican from Texas, and offered him money to get rid of her. And at the same time, Giuliani's out there smearing her. Well, she's going to testify on Friday. But today, let's go through some of the highlights of the testimony today so we're all on the same page. There is some new facts that have come out of this. There is corroboration. This is clearly not a situation where it's about one phone call on July 25th, as Donald Trump wants to say it is, and then in his own mind, because he knows he can just mislead his base, is telling them he did nothing wrong. He calls it a perfect call. It is not a transcript. It is a confession. Remember that. The Trump confession is not helpful for Donald Trump. But this was an entire episode and efforts to get the Ukrainian government to play ball with Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. I think with Rudy to make some money, but also help Trump in his election. And that began at the very latest last summer. And sometimes I see some experts on TV saying this began in the spring. That's not true. The 2 guys who got indicted, Giuliani's associates, sat down with Congressman Pete Sessions in Texas when he was running for re-election, said, we'll raise a lot of money. You help us get rid of Maria Yovanovitch. And Sessions writes a letter to Pompeo, go and get rid of her. She's bad-mouthing Trump. That's when this began. That's when this whole criminal conspiracy began last year, and we don't know why that began there. That's still, we don't have answers to questions. In fact, some of the testimony by both people are sort of stunned why they went after Yovanovitch the way they did. And I think it's going to tell us a lot once we find that out. So let me give you some of the, he's been serving in the military for over 20 years. He went to Iraq. He got a Purple Heart. He was wounded in combat there. And he works in the White House. He's still active duty. He's still a lieutenant colonel. And his testimony first says April 21st, 2019, he testified that Trump's first phone call with the Ukrainian President Zelensky was a positive call. That's how he deems it. He says, testified the call was positive. The president expressed the desire to work with President Zelensky and extend an invitation to the White House. And that's the phone call today, if you're following the news, Trump saying, I'm going to release that call because that's perfect too. What's interesting, it's going to be what's missing from that call, which is going to hurt Donald Trump. And he doesn't grasp that right now. And I'll share what that is. If everything, the defense by the Republicans is Donald Trump was rooting out corruption in the Ukraine before we gave money to the Ukraine, that first phone call should have raised corruption. Because to remind everyone, in 2017, we, through our government, authorized over $300 million to the Ukrainian government. In 2018, we authorized over $300 million to the Ukrainian government in aid. If corruption was so rampant, why didn't Trump ask about it in 2017? Why didn't he ask about it in 2018? And certainly, why didn't he ask about it when the new president who got elected in April 21st, 2019 phone call, he got elected a week before? Why didn't he talk about it there? So that won't be in there. What will be there is to talk about a meeting, and he will understand, Trump, that this meeting is really important. And so Vindman makes some other really good point here. And I'm so happy he made this point because I didn't know how important the military aid. Vindman says here, quote, this is his testimony, I'll read verbatim. The amount of the money that we're talking about here, $400 million, he's talking about the U.S. military aid to Ukraine. He goes, might not mean much. You know, in terms of the U.S. budget, it's only a fraction of a fraction. But for the Ukrainians, it amounts to about 10% of their military budget. And you know that actually is a significant portion of their GDP because the Ukrainians spend about 5 to 6% of their GDP on the defense. So he adds, this is not a negligible amount. And you know, we're trying to continue the relationship and advance U.S. national security interests. So think about that. The withholding of $400 million was 10% of their total military budget. And they are in a hot war with Russian-backed separatists right in their country, on the border of their country. In fact, as the LA Times has quantified, since Trump withheld the aid, which was the latest was July, but we think earlier, but from July till now, at least 25 Ukrainian troops died. And, you know, the equipment we were going to give, as George Kent testified yesterday, was sniper rifles and equipment that would help the troops on the ground. Did any of those 25 die because Trump withheld aid? I can't make that argument. I'm a reasonable person. I'm not going to say, well, 3 died because of it. But what I can tell you is this. Donald Trump knew it was a hot war. Donald Trump knew Ukrainians were dying. And still, Donald Trump withheld 10% of the military aid because he wanted them to help him win re-election. Because that was Trump's priority. There's no doubt he knew that. Here's another important part from Vindman's testimony. This is a key day. There are 2 key dates that we know of so far. July 25th, the phone call, and July 10th. July 10th, we're going to hear a lot about that next week. July 10th is when Ukrainians and certain officials in the White House, including Colonel Vindman, met with Ukrainian officials there in the White House to talk about aid. Ambassador Gordon Sondland's there. Gordon Sondland, we should just call him Stooge Sondland. Stooge Sondland's the guy who gave $1 million to Trump to get this job. He donated one. He's a rich hotel owner. He's not a career diplomat. He's the only one in all of this not a career guy. Gave $1 million legally to Trump's inaugural committee and got returned this. Doesn't know politics, doesn't know Trump, had no idea what he was getting in bed with. And now, I think Sondland very likely or possibly will get indicted when this is over. Not definite, but possible. So in the testimony here, the July 10th meeting, key meeting, Vindman testifies Ambassador Sondland proceeded to discuss the deliverable required in order to get the meeting he alluded to. And what he means by that, and I'll read more of the testimony right now, in the meeting, Gordon Sondland said point blank, if you want Zelensky, your president, to meet with our president, you got to start this investigation. But it's more than just a meeting, folks. If it was just a meeting, I don't think Trump gets impeached. It's more than the meeting. The military aid's also tied to this. Vindman testified the meeting proceeded well, this July 10th meeting, until the Ukrainians broached the topic of a meeting between the two presidents. The Ukrainians saw this meeting as critically important in order to solidify the support for their most important international partner. Ambassador Sondland started to speak about Ukrainians delivering specific investigations in order to secure the meeting with the president. At that moment, Ambassador John Bolton, cut the meeting short. It's very interesting in this testimony of two people today. John Bolton, he's not coming out across as a really good guy. He's coming across as a guy who doesn't want to commit crimes. We disagree fundamentally on issues, but John Bolton, on some level, is an institutionalist. It continues on. Vindman testifies, when the Ukrainians raised the issue of trying to figure out what date would be for the presidential meeting, Ambassador Sondland proceeded to discuss the deliverable required in order to get the meeting. Very quickly thereafter, Ambassador Bolton terminated the meeting. Pleasant professional, said it was a pleasure meeting with you. So then, there's more testimony. Who's all over this? Mick Mulvaney. Mick Mulvaney is Donald Trump's acting chief of staff and does 19 other things in the administration. Mick Mulvaney, according to the testimony of two people, is the person who told them all the aid's going to be withheld. There will be no meeting without an investigation. Here's Mick Mulvaney. Here's the question. Do you understand how he came to believe this deliverable was necessary? Talking about Sondland. Answer by Vindman. So I heard him say that had been coordinated with the chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney. Question, what did he say about that? He just said that he had a conversation with Mr. Mulvaney, and this is what was required in order to get the meeting. And it goes on. Did he explain what investigations were needed? He said he was talking about the 2016 election and an investigation into the Bidens and Burisma, the corporation that Hunter Biden was on the board. So it's very clear the word Biden was brought up here. Burisma was brought up here. The lieutenant colonel testified something very interesting. This is subtle but interesting. He testified he prepares a lot of the information for the president's call with Zelensky. He explained the whole chain of command. But he's the main source in this area. This is his specialty. And he was asked under oath, did you include anything in your preparation about the Bidens or Burisma? And he said, of course not. So Trump went off script, talked about it on his own. Then Vindman went on more, said there was no doubt on that phone call of July 25th what Trump wanted. So he wanted an investigation. It was very clear to Vindman. When was the aid held up, Lieutenant Vindman? So we have certain blanks filled in right now, which are helpful. Vindman says he became aware by July 3rd that a hold had been placed on military aid to the Ukraine. So that's the first testified date, July 3rd. It seems to be even earlier than that. In any event, the question is, when did the Ukraine find out about this? Well, according to Vindman, it's unclear, but he knows certainly by mid-August because the Ukrainian deputy chief of mission asked him, why is the U.S. withholding aid? So this was not even public reporting. This is new. And this was not, no one knew the aid was being withheld then publicly. Vindman had an idea. He was told early July. So by mid-August, the Ukraine was asking about it, which of course meant they knew about it sooner than that. We're talking mid-August. Trump's talking July 25th to the guy, to Zelensky. The Ukraine, 10% of their military budget. That's why it's so important he talked about 10% of their military budget. This is a big chunk of aid. Wasn't a few $100s. They were really waiting on this money. They were desperate for this money. And it's being withheld month after month after month. So then it goes on that finally the aid was released September 18th, according to Pence told Zelensky. And it was told as well to Vindman. So what we know clearly from Vindman's testimony, Sondland saying right in front of him, it's not third party, it's not secondhand, right in front of him, hey, if you want a meeting, you got to do the investigation we want into the Bidens. Point blank. There's no games. That's it. Mick Mulvaney. Now, this was secondhand, but Sondland said, Mick Mulvaney said to me, no investigation, no meeting. And clearly the military aid was being held here as well. That's going on because Sondland made it clear yesterday, a few days ago, that specifically the resumption of the military aid, as he said, would not happen until an investigation statement was made. I mean, the exact words of Sondland a few days ago, just to make it clear, folks, this is not just about a meeting. It's about military aid. Gordon Sondland's updated testimony, because he realized he'd committed perjury, was about a September 1st meeting that he had with the Ukrainian official. He said, quote, "I said that the resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement that he'd been discussing for many weeks." And that was the one about the Biden. So you got that. So that's Vindman. It's pretty clear. Then you have the testimony of Dr. Fiona Hill. Dr. Fiona Hill is a career expert in the area of the Ukraine. She worked in the this administration here for a few years. She's at Brookings Institute and other places. Well-respected person from everything I've seen about her. According to her, the first thing she talks about Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch and the attack, and he said she was removed because of, quote, the result of the campaign by Mr. Giuliani had set in motion. And she went in detail about the lies that she was smeared with, Yovanovitch was smeared with, and why. And it made no sense to her. Why did you go after Yovanovitch that hard? Why would you try to smear her that in such an ugly way? And that's the question I have too. And I'm telling you, the answer to that question, I could be mistaken, but to me, just reasonableness, common sense is the answer to that question will tell us a lot. What did she do last year, not in the last few months, last year, to so upset Giuliani that he sent his two associates who got indicted to raise money for Republicans, and one of the big asks were, help me get her fired. What did they do? And I think that's about money. I think Giuliani was trying to make money. I'm not sure if Trump was involved in that or not. I can't tell you about that. So Dr. Hill also testified here corroborating Vindman, saying that Sondland, in front of her, had said Mick Mulvaney had told the Ukrainians if they want a meeting with the Trump, they must do investigations. Here's her exact testimony. Then, and this is right in front of her, then Ambassador Sondland blurted out, right in front of her, blurted out is her word. So again, this is direct testimony of something she observed. Tested that Sondland blurted out, we have an agreement with the chief of staff for a meeting if these investigations in the energy sector start. And Ambassador Bolton immediately stiffened. He said words to the effects, I can't say word for word, she's saying, but he was very upset about it. The meeting ended, just like Vindman said. Then it got better or worse, depending where you are in this. In a follow-up meeting the same day that Dr. Hill was at, Ambassador Sondland again referred to an agreement with Chief of Staff Mulvaney. In order to get the meeting the Ukrainians want, they would have to begin the investigation. John Bolton was so concerned by this, Dr. Hill testified that Ambassador Bolton said to her, you go and tell Eisenberg, and that's John Eisenberg, the attorney for the National Security Council, who Trump won't let come testify because he knows he doesn't want him to tell us this stuff. You go tell Eisenberg that I'm not part of whatever drug deal Sondland and Mulvaney are cooking up on this, and you go and tell him whatever you heard and what I've said. She goes, tells John Eisenberg. John Eisenberg's also the lawyer that Alexander Vindman went to after the July 25th phone call and go, this is crazily wrong. And what was Eisenberg's response? Nothing, never got back to him, but he put the transcript or the summary on the super secret server so no one could see it. And it'd be great to get Eisenberg to testify under oath about why he did this and who directed him, but Trump won't let him come and testify because there's obstruction of justice. But this is very interesting. What Dr. Fiona Hill said about Eisenberg. Eisenberg told her that he followed up through his reporting authority about what had happened, about Mulvaney, the comments about Mulvaney and Sondland saying, if you want a meeting with the Ukrainians, you got to do the investigation of Biden. And he said he went through his reporting authority and it went to White House counsel Pat Cipollone. So now you got Donald Trump's White House counsel implicated as well. This is really very much like Watergate. Because this is like we're working backwards, but it's like a mystery where you know who did it. It's like a whodunit when it begins on page 1. This is the guy that did it. It was Trump. And now you're going to have all these other games going on. And we'll get to the games in a second because it's really funny what the Republicans in the House, per the Washington Post, are planning to do. She testified that more about Bolton being very, very concerned. He called it an improper arrangement was going on. So John Bolton, he says he'll testify if he gets a subpoena and the court clears him. The Democrats don't want to wait. They want to get this done. I think it would be very compelling to have John Bolton testify under oath on television, a Republican, a guy who was a Fox News contributor, about this unbelievable exchange, this extortion that went on. So overall, to sum up here, A lot of stuff going here. The story's really coming together. And it's really not that much different than we knew from the July 25th confession of Donald Trump. We're just filling in the blanks here. And Sondland's made it clear, it was not just about a meeting. It was about the aid as well. And that's what makes it so, to me, that's where the impeachable offense is. Having a meeting or not, it's troubling. You shouldn't be using meetings to investigate your political opponent. Is that impeachable? Maybe, maybe not. You can debate that all day. Withholding military aid, withholding 10% of the military aid of the Ukraine while they're in the midst of a hot war with Russia, that is the very essence of what the framers of the Constitution meant in high crimes and misdemeanors and what they meant by an offense against the public. That's what they were worried about. They were also worried about foreign interference. This is what Trump was doing, inviting foreign interference to help him win an election and at the same time extorting this help. And here's the fun part. Washington Post reporting today, guess what the Republicans in the House are planning? Some of them are saying their new defense is to argue that Gordon Sondland, Rudy Giuliani, and Mick Mulvaney were acting independently of the president. So they went rogue. These three guys got together. Sondland, who used to run hotels, they gave $1 million. Mulvaney, who was just a congressman who looks like a deer in the headlights, and Giuliani, who's just horrible. But they on their own said, and Trump didn't know anything they were doing. They were out there, this rogue campaign, like in the sort of like the Bourne Identity, something's going on and no one knows what's going on. That argument could have actually worked. I'm not kidding. That argument could have been plausible. Here's the big problem with that argument. Trump's confession. That's the problem. If you didn't have Trump's confession of the July 25th phone call that he released, that would actually be a plausible argument until we could find other ways, like in Watergate, where it was no longer plausible. But the reason that's not a plausible argument and that Trump had no idea what they were doing, in the July 25th confession of Donald Trump, he talks about reciprocity with the Ukrainian president. He talks about the aid with the Ukrainian president. He says these words, which will be famous in history looking back to Zelensky after talking about aid and all the help we've given. Quote, "I would like you to do us a favor, though." Close quote. Those are famous words. Those will be famous words. I would like you to do us a favor, though. And then he adds, Trump first talks about the Ukraine survey. He goes, the other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son. That Biden stopped the prosecution. And a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the attorney general, meaning ours, would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution. So if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. And over cited Bill Barr, attorney general, meaning not only using his office, he's using the Department of Justice and implicating them and getting them involved in helping his 2020 reelection campaign. That's why there's no plausible deniability here. This confession by Trump makes it clear he knew about it. He brought up the Bidens in the phone call with Zelensky. He talked about aid. He made it clear. And it's not quid pro quo. The word's extortion. It's not transcript. It's confession. That's how we talk about it on this show. And when I'm on Joy Reid's show tomorrow, that's the exact words I will use. And every time I'm in the media, I will use those words. Confession, not transcript, not quid pro quo, which just means this for that, which is not illegal. Every day you go to Starbucks, give them $5, they give you a coffee. That's not illegal. Extortion's illegal. Bribery's illegal. This is bribery or extortion. I think it's extortion. It's arguably bribery as well. Quid pro quo is an element of bribery. So that's where that kind of bribery comes up type of thing. I think extortion is a better case to make here. So, folks, next week, television, must-see TV, Wednesday and Friday. Look, I unpacked a lot of stuff here. I just want us all to be on the same page. People have busy days. They're at work. Can't always figure out what's going on. Don't have the time. My goal here is to bring you up to speed every night on what went on during the day. So this is what happened today. These testimonies were released. These people testified last week. And now, and what's remarkable, there are no Republicans pushing back on the substance. They're pushing back on process still. It's unfair. And Trump went from, there should be public hearings, to now they're going to be public. He goes, there should be no hearings today. No, there should be no hearings at all. We have to make the case here, my friends, my brothers and sisters, to the people in the middle. Forget the Trumpers. You're not going to peel them off. The ones in the middle who are too busy. They're not following the news. Or they're not sure. The economy's pretty good. They're not sure what to think about Trump. Or they kind of don't like Trump, but they're not sure exactly what all this is. It's this simple. Trump tried to extort a foreign leader to help him win re-election. He wanted a foreign leader to interfere in our election to help him against Joe Biden. That's all this is. It's really that simple. All this other stuff just fills it in. And being a lawyer, I can't help it. I like seeing the case take shape. I see it all here. I see the facts. I see the direct evidence. By the way, sworn testimony is direct evidence. You can convict someone in the court of law with sworn testimony. So it's not like anyone's to admit anything. And this is where we are. So I'd love to hear from you. You're my guest right to the top of the hour. I'd love to hear what you think about this, about if you have any theory on Marie Yovanovitch. I am so intrigued. Why for a year they wanted her out? Like, what was she doing that so upset them? And, I've shared my theory, but I think there's something really, figuring that out, I think might help us all on this. And I could be wrong. I'm the first to say, but I'm telling you, I think there's something there. Why did they raise money to get her out? Why did Pete Sessions, the congressman, get approached by these guys, these kind of like thuggish looking guys? And he writes a letter that day. He meets with them and he writes a letter that day to Trump. And then others on Fox News and the Trump world, Donald Trump Jr. himself attacks her, and Giuliani goes after Yovanovitch for months and months and months until she's gone. And Trump badmouths her in the phone call on July 25th, saying, yeah, she was bad news, that woman. Why? Why was she bad news? And the obvious thing would be she was standing in the way of an investigation to Joe Biden. But that makes more sense in the time from about April till about April and May. She was actually terminated in May. But why a year before? Like, what was going on a year before? And I think that might be just run-of-the-mill crime to make money, and that Giuliani's involved with that, with his two buddies who got indicted. Could be wrong. And Trump could be involved with that to make money too. I'm not sure. All right. Love to hear from you. You're my guest right to the top of the hour. There's no wrong answer. We'll call this segment Speculating Irresponsibly. No, we won't call it that. That's why I playfully call it. Got a lot of great guests tonight. Jamie Harrison will be with us at the top of the hour. He's running against Lindsey Graham, and he's going to beat Lindsey Graham because we're going to help him beat Lindsey Graham, because flipping that seat really takes us closer to taking the Senate, and then getting rid of Mitch McConnell as well. And then in the third hour, it's What Just Happened. And John Fugelsang's going to join us for the whole hour, as well as Bob DeBono, another funny comic. You're my guest right now. I'd love to hear from you. 866-997-4748. What do you think's going on? Are you happy with the way the Democrats are doing this? Is it making sense to you? Is it not making sense? Maybe it's my fault. That's fine. But overall, is it making sense? Is it clear? Is it clean? What else of the framing should we be doing to make a better case here? Be right back after this.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
I think Trump clips that they plan.